All right, our dough has risen for 3 hours and we'll see how it did. So our loaf pan, it did even out. It didn't rise to the top of the edge, but that's okay. And our bowl is within an inch of the top, so that's fine too. All right, so the next thing you're gonna wanna do is you start the oven at 500 degrees, just so it starts good and hot, and then you'll turn it down. Both loaves, you'll do the same. Okay, you can actually do this about a half an hour before your bread timer is done. So at 2.5 hours if you're gonna bake it at 3 hours. So here are your options. Loaf pan is easy. He just goes straight into the oven, the end. For the round loaf, it's gonna be freestanding. You have several options. The very best option is if you have a cast iron Dutch oven. It's fine if you have one of the pretty enameled ones. And we'll use a piece of parchment paper and we'll flip our dough out onto the parchment and then lower it down into this, because you're gonna start out by heating this up in the oven, so it'll be searing hot. So we'll lower the dough on a parchment paper down in and put the lid on, and I'll explain that when we get there. Even better than this is if you have both a Dutch oven and a cast iron skillet that's the same size, that will fit over like a lid. This one will be the bottom, because then you don't need the parchment paper to keep from burning yourself, and you just put this guy on top as a lid. So they'll both go in the oven, they'll both get to 500 degrees. You'll plop your dough in the bottom, use this as a cover, and I'll show that when it's time. So this is what I'm gonna do. If you don't have a matching cast iron, you can just use the parchment paper and lower it down in and then put the lid back on. Or if you don't have anything cast iron, you can just put a stoneware baking sheet in. And so that will get to 500 degrees, and we'll just turn it out right onto here and put it back in. What are the other options? I guess if you just have a metal baking pan, you would want to use it on parchment paper so that the dough doesn't stick to the metal, and you can just put it in that way. If you don't have something with a lid, then you want to put a rimmed cookie sheet with some boiling water in it at the same time that you put in the dough. So we'll talk about that later. So I've turned on the oven. I have the Dutch oven and the cast iron skillet. So we're gonna put those in. And you do want to give it about a half an hour to heat up so that it's good and completely 100% hot all the way up. So we'll come back in half an hour and I'll show you how to flip the dough out and get it in the oven.